Right, welcome back everyone. I see there's lots of people in this one. This is very good. This isn't really an entertaining one, obviously, but I'm hoping it's going to be very informative for you, and it's going to get people starting to think about how we can reduce the chances of fatal accidents. I mean, fatal accidents have always been part of our sport, always part of aviation, of course, and we're going to look at some statistics, both for the UK and worldwide, and then we're going to get into the last couple of fatal accidents and some thoughts around that, okay? Before I start, I appreciate some of you have just done the homekeeping bit, but we're going to get into that because there's some people, new faces here as well, I see. If there's a fire, something goes, rather than being a hero and trying to put it out, we're going to exit out the room, go out the front door, and we're going to meet out there in the car park, okay? If you hear a fire alarm, it's not a drill, all right? It's for real, so out we go. Mobile phones, please be respectful, keep them on silent. Any questions or comments? I know it's annoying, but we're going to hand this round. You grip the steel, and then you give your word, all right? With this, the reason why that is because Epitech doing a fantastic job. They're filming, they're also doing the audio on this, and this is all going to be on the YouTube channel, so other people can learn this from at home as well, all right? So it's really handy if you've got that. It works for their audio. Even though we can hear you in this room, they might not on the video, all right? Filming and photography warning. Please be advised that filming and or photography will be taking place in this room. If you do not wish to appear in any of the images captured, please sit at the back of the conference room. The photographs and film will be used by British Skydiving for uploading to our Skydive the Mag YouTube channel for the benefit of those members who were unable to attend. The recordings and photographs will be held by British Skydiving and its contracted partners. They may also be included in the British Skydiving publications or promotional material and may also be published on our website and social media platforms. If you don't want to be in the video, hang out at the back. You're still going to be able to see and be a part of it, but obviously you won't be on the video. So, big thank you to our, main three sponsors this year. Romero Sports and Leisure, that's our insurance broker and has been for some years. Vigil, who made those wonderful backpacks that you're all wandering around with, and they also make fantastic AADs. And also everyone's favourite manifesting and drop zone management software, Burble. I'm Ryan Mancy. I'm a Safety and Training Officer for British Skydiving. My colleague, who will likely be running in part way through this presentation to assist with some demonstrations, will be Kev Dynan. He was involved with the last, he gave all the statistics on the last presentation for those who were in the room previously. So the aim of this presentation is to look at statistical data regarding fatal accidents worldwide and the UK, and to look at what lessons can be learned from the last two fatal accidents in the UK. International Skydiving Commission. Every year they collect data from as many countries as they can. All right? They produce a report, which we got at the end of 2024, which is relevant to 2023. They're kind of a year behind. It takes them time to collect all the data, to analyse it and produce a very detailed report, okay? 42 countries supplied data. These are the main countries that do lots of skydiving. Out of a total something like 80 countries, but a lot of these countries don't have governing bodies. There's no need to report stuff, so a lot of them don't, but these are very, very small things anyway. All right, so we've got the majority of the data is what I'm telling you. So you can see this as a minimum amount. So in 2023, 7.08 million skydives were made by 1.3 million jumpers worldwide. 33 people were killed in skydiving in 2023. These figures include tandems. There were 2 tandem fatalities. 1 fatality per 2,014,651 jumps, or just under 40,000 jumpers. So we're going to break this down into what were the fatalities and who was involved, basically. So 5 were students out of the 33, which is 15%, and they consider students 0 to 25 free falls. This is kind of similar up to our A license, B license, and C license, this bit, all right? C license and above, that is. So 3 were intermediate jumpers, which makes 9%, and 25, which is 76% of fatal accidents, were considered experts. So 251 jumps plus. So our C license and above, really. So that's telling you something, isn't it? We're going to break down into what these were, all right? Cutaway and low or no reserve pulls, there were 2. No pull or low pull on the main, there was 1. There were 30 others. Let's look at those other 30. Surprise, surprise, intentional fast landings was the biggest. There was 12. Other landing errors, there were 6. So think about that. That's 18 people died out of the 33 under a perfectly good parachute, and this was just a landing error. Whether it was an intentional fast landing that they misjudged, or whether they had some other problem, like they messed up their landing pattern and they ended up flying into an object or something like that. 2 tandem fatalities, 1 free-fall collision, 1 equipment problems, 1 medical issues, 1 incorrect emergency procedures, so pulling the handles in the wrong order. 1 main or reserve, no main or reserve deployment, so all the way in. 1 cutaway over high water. We very nearly had one of those in the UK on a demo years ago, where the guy thought, oh, this is going to look really cool. And he flew over the water and cut away. And what he thought was probably about 20 foot was more like 120 foot, his depth perception. And they pulled him out unconscious. So be warned if you're playing water jumps. Instability and entanglement, there was 1. There was 1 loss of consciousness on a wingsuit jumper. 1 main and reserve entanglement. 1 static line jump where they had a broken line, there was no cutaway, and he started a slow spiral all the way to the ground. So that was the 33 over 2023. Of the 33 fatalities, 28 appeared to have occurred with the parachutist having at least 1 good parachute on his or her back. 21 occurred after the successful deployment of the main parachute. 23 appeared to have been caused by human error. 2 of the 2023 fatalities were first jump students, and 1 solo jumper, 1 tandem student. So how many, this is over the years now, dating all the way back to the year 2000. We're not going to go into each individual year, but I want you to notice a trend, all right? How many were first-time jump students? Now, this is the sad thing. To me, first-time jump students are pretty much entirely dependent on us. Yes, they can do things that they're not trained to do. They do things by surprise at times, but we've got to look at it as they are dependent on us regarding what they're doing. Once they're students as a whole, really, once they're experienced, we've given them those foundational techniques, procedures, all that good stuff, so that they can actually become independent. They can go out there and pretty much hold their own. Yes, they're going to be guided by their own PTOs, chief instructors, and we're not going to let them go out free-flying just after their consoles, that sort of thing. There'll be a progression, but they are pretty much independent regarding what they're doing. Obviously, we've just been through 2023, but looking down, for instance, 2022, there were 54 fatalities, 5 of which were first-time jumpers. And you move down and you notice, on the whole, it gets worse the further back you go. So I suppose that's one good thing, is that we seem to be getting safer, which is a great thing. The worst year there was 2021, where there were 92 fatal accidents worldwide, 12 of which is 13%, were first-time jumpers. So we have come a long way, but we need to continue with this trend of getting better. So this is a great paragraph at one point of the report, which I'm going to read out to you. Human error has always been and continues to be the major factor in skydiving fatalities. The attention of all personnel involved in coaching and training must be continuously focused on safety training and reinforcement. What do I mean by reinforcement? Anyone? The what, sorry? Practice. So once someone's learned a skill, whether it's their emergency procedures or whatever it is, that's great, but then if you never practice it again, you're never going to stay sharp on it. And in an overwhelming environment, such as a malfunction or some sort of emergency situation happening, it's not dialed in. You haven't trained it into the subconscious. Through repetition of skills, you train it in so it becomes like a muscle memory. Think of it that way. So that's it, training and reinforcement. And that's what I'm trying to get you guys to think about, the reinforcement side of things. Safety is best taught at drop zones, where students from their first jump as they progress have their attention drawn to safety issues and safe conduct. Canopy handling and landing skills should feature prominently. It must be noted that 18 out of the 33 fatalities occurred as the skydiver was landing the parachute. CT skills, that's the main issue worldwide. All right? We've got better at this dramatically in the UK over the previous however many years. Why was that? There was one significant thing that happened that forced us. What was that? There was numerous low turn accidents, and then we put something out there that changed things. Stu? The CT manual. The CT manual, and also mandatory wing loading. So now you have to get to a certain jump number and experience level, coaching, in order to get certain, CT1, CT2, and beyond, before we can actually let you do certain things or jump certain parachutes. There's some places abroad have adopted that with overnight success, and there's some places that just haven't, and it's just terrible, and it continues to stay that way. Right, since 2004, this is our British skydiving and also BPA as it was then. This is the last the last 20 years of fatal accidents in the UK. This original spreadsheet actually goes back to 1982. And what I've done, I've just got the last 20 years so we can have a look at. I've kept out people's names and where they happened, but we're just going to have a look at some of these. The columns are, we've got all the way down to 91. All right, so that's 91 fatal accidents since 1982. We got the date it happened, the person's gender, age, category. We don't really do that anymore with your Cat 10 and things like that, but it's just an older way that we used to establish what level of experience the person was at. How many jumps they've got, that's quite a relevant column. And the type, all of these really are on square parachutes. Obviously, when you look at it going further back, a lot of them are on round parachutes as well. But whether they're AFF or static line, that's all there as well. And also the nature of the accident. So let's just read through the nature of the accidents. Low turn, no pull on main or reserve, a suicide. Removed equipment in free fall, a suicide. A low turn, canopy spiraled to the ground from 1,500 feet. That was on an AFF level 1. Low turn at night, that was with an experienced skydiver with 2,000 plus jumps. Low main opening, AAD fired, both canopies not fully deployed. Now with that one, as an older gentleman, he was 74 years old, he had over 1,000 jumps, and for what I understand of this, he had been grounded the week before for pulling low. Right? He pulled just above his AAD firing height, and his AAD didn't fire, he landed, got a good bollocking from the CI, you grounded for the week, think about it, came back the previous week or a week after or something, and went up and did the same thing again. Only this time, he was over some higher ground. And he pulled so low that as his main was starting to deploy, his AAD fired, he had both canopies snivelling, and he impacted on this higher ground. So something to think about regarding upping your AAD heights, specifically if you're jumping at an airfield that has hills and things like around it. Just something to think about there. Moving on, cut through the harness under canopy. This was a static line jump, first ever jump, and it was a suicide. The guy turned up, did the course, came back a few days later because the weather was bad, got refreshed, went up on the jump, During the canopy ride, produced from his jumpsuit a pair of garden secateurs and started cutting lines. That was the end of him. Cutaway main, low, reserve not fully deployed. No main or reserve pull. AAD not switched on, they considered it a suicide. Low turn, spiralling main canopy with a brake lock. That was someone who had over 2,000 jumps. Canopy entanglement, those two, that was a terrible one. They both entangled and it was a fatal accident. Low turn, low cutaway of main canopy. That was a static line level one, first jump. Low turn, canopy collision, low cutaway of main canopy, canopy spiraled to the ground, jumper unconscious after a hard opening. Low cutaway after canopy entanglement, canopy collapsed during a low turn, unconscious in free fall spinning on back, AAD fire, sadly, landed under a spinning main canopy, low turn, canopy collapse, low turn, and the next two which we're going to talk about in more depth. So I've rattled through that to give you an idea of what has been happening in the UK over the last 20 years. And from what I've just rattled through there, we can assess the biggest risk areas are pretty obviously canopy skills, low turns in particular. Mental health. How many of those were suicides? That's ridiculous. There was 4 of them. One of them, as I mentioned before, I don't think it could have been helped because he came into the sport with the idea that he was going to end it all. But the rest of them were in the sport, all right? Mental health is a big issue. We've got to look after each other. We've got a great community of skydivers, and I want to see it kept that way. So when you're on the drop zone and there's an oddball, I think I was that oddball, well, still am that oddball really, and I see plenty of them around this room actually, and they come wandering over to the group, and people are kind of wandering away because they don't really want to talk to them. Right, what I'm trying to foster is an idea of inclusion. All right, I was at a military drop zone a little while ago, and they got a poster on the wall that says suicide prevention. So suicide prevention, I don't really like that because that's getting in the mind that when you see someone really low, you're going to try and stop them from ending it all. The way I see it, we should be inclusive, and then we never get to that stage. So less clickiness in the sport, less egos, less nonsense, welcoming people, no matter where they're from, what they're like, if they're socially impaired or whatever. And then we can knock that one on the head, I personally feel. Canopy collisions resulting in entanglement. Again, this comes down to CT skills. And in instructors and coaches, you can be a massive part in stopping this, in helping this. Low cutaways, low or no reserve deployments. Again, this comes down to teaching it properly in the first place and reinforcing this as we go. So, and we're going to look at this, how we're going to go about this in a little while. Packing and equipment related issues. That's another one. How many? Put your hand up if you've got a packing certificate. Put your hand up if you haven't. Not naming and shaming anyone. Okay, that's great. I'm guessing most of you are instructors and coaches and things like that, yeah, so you're going to have one anyway. It amazes me nowadays the amount of people that don't have a packing certificate because they want to do the bare minimum, they want to get the brief so that they get it signed off on their B license sheet, and or their Jumpmaster 1 sheet, and then they just give a $5 to the packer and they don't want to know about it. But the trouble is, if you don't know about your kit properly and you don't know how to put together a free ring and how to maintain kit and know what something looks like when it's wrong, then it's a big problem and we need to work on that. So I'm trying to encourage as many people as possible on bad weather days, right, let's get people over and run through some packing stuff, run through some kit stuff, and just get people involved, get people working on their packing certificates is what I'm pointing out, really, because that's what's missing at the moment, in my opinion.
Ryan,
Yo.
just to chip in on that one, there's getting a packing certificate.
Mm-hmm.
There's getting a packing certificate, but then there's continuing to practice the skills that you learn on that as well, because people get the packing certificate and then there's no need to redo the 3 rings or hook up a canopy. They just don't get the opportunity. So it's keeping that going as well.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, reinforcement training. People don't typically want to do that because a lot of it isn't the most fun thing when we can go skydiving, or we could go to the bar, or we could go and do something else. And instead of doing those things, we're going to start learning more about the equipment, but that's where we need to go. How can we make it entertaining for people? How can we make it engaging and interesting? That's down to you guys. All I can do as a safety and training officer is say, yeah, we got this regulation and this, and we need to stick to this, but it's you guys that are actually in the field making the difference. So that's what I'm asking you to do. Biggest risk areas, whilst worldwide, 70% of fatalities are attributed to human error, as we just learned, all, in my opinion, are attributed to human factors. So, for instance, we might have issues with environmental conditions or equipment that somehow fails, but it's the person that's put themselves in that situation in the first place, or it's the person that didn't realize the equipment needed maintaining and eventually just broke. If you want to know more about human factors, that's a massive subject. Kev Dynan, my partner in crime here, he'll be in a moment actually, he did a YouTube chat at the expo here, so you can find it on the British Skydiving YouTube channel called DuPont's Dirty Dozen. All right, and it goes into the 12 human factors which are relevant. It came from aviation, from engineering in aviation, but then it swiftly got trained into pilots, and most of it is entirely relevant to us as well as skydivers. So I urge you to have a look at that and study a bit about human factors. As instructors, it's really, really useful stuff. Any questions on what we covered so far? Because we're about to get into the case studies now. Now, one thing I will say on this, these next two case studies, obviously, we're going to be looking at some images. There's nothing gory or, like that. But that said, we're going to show you some of the images because both of them were flying camera, and you're going to see certain things, and it's going to ring true for you what's actually going on and what would you do in those situations, or how can we better train people. So it's important to see these pictures. However, these next images we're not going to be putting on the YouTube channel because this is not for entertainment, it is purely for education, okay? Case 1, September 2021. So this was a camera flyer for a tandem skydive. The person was a C-licensed skydiver with 541 jumps. They were also a category system instructor and an FS coach, so they were fairly experienced. A second camera flyer was also on the jump. Approximate altitude was 11,500 feet. Estimated tandem deployment altitude was 4,500 feet. More about that in a minute, because what's the minimum opening height for tandem? It's 5,000 feet. However, this sparked a bit of a discussion after this happened. The Board of Inquiry didn't find any breaches there, but we had to make some amendments to the operations manual to make it clear regarding deployment heights. More about that in a moment, though. Short track away from the other camera flyer. So if you imagine that tandem's just deployed, see you later, buddy, we're tracking away. So what usually happens if you're filming a tandem is actually, once you get 1,000 feet underneath the tandem, you can just deploy. And then you've got more altitude to deal with any problems should they occur. Well, when you've got two people, obviously, they've now got to track away from each other, which is going to take some altitude. They then fell through a thin layer of cloud, approximately 300 foot thick, between 3,000 and 4,000 feet. Again, this took some time. They could have deployed at that point, but didn't. It would appear that once they got through the cloud, they turned 90 degrees to face the PLA and then attempted to deploy. Now, there is some disparity. Some people are saying, actually, they started attempting to open their main parachute and they randomly turned towards the drop zone, and I understand that is entirely possible. But when I look at it, I know I've done that lots of times myself. I've gone through a little bit of cloud. Where's the DZ perfect? and then I've deployed, okay, or attempted to deploy in this case. So once they turn 90 degrees, face the PLA, they're now at approximately 2,800 feet. What's the minimum deployment height for an experienced jumper? What's that? With cameras. Well, yes, C license jumper and above is what? 2.5. Perfect. 2 attempts to throw or locate the main pilot chute, unsuccessful. Now they're approximately between 2,400 feet and 2,100 feet. Immediately, and they were really sharp at it actually, got straight into, carried out a full reserve drill, cutaway and reserve handles both pulled. This is the image from the aircraft before exiting, all right? As you can see, there is rather a lot of cloud. It's certainly not suitable for students, but for experienced jumpers, if you see the video, you can actually see the hangars of the airfield, and you see parts of the airfield. You can also see there are fairly large gaps, and like I said, it's a 300-foot layer. So they went, filmed the tandem. This is the image as they get to the cloud. So they're then going through the cloud. As you can see, the ground is just starting to come into focus. And all right, where's the airfield? There it is. So now we're going to go for the pull. We can't. For whatever reason, we don't know if they couldn't locate or if they couldn't extract the pilot chute, but there was some sort of problem. It would appear from the movements on the video that they made 2 attempts, which is exactly what they would have been trained to do. And also, as an instructor, that's exactly what you're going to train your students to do. Straight into emergency procedures. What's this here on the left of the screen? Actually, that's the reserve pin. Well, I say it's the pin. It's where you've got the reserve cable here. Right, still in freefall. What's going on? So we're looking behind now, and as you can see, there's a cutaway cable there. And then all of a sudden, this comes into view, and we've got a few seconds of looking at this towing the pilot chute and trying to work out what is wrong. Why is it not extracting the free bag from the container? It's at full bridle extension. If we zoom in, this is what we have. There's another shot. So, regarding the pilot chute, it would appear that the pilot chute is deformed in some way, producing way less lift, and that is the potential as to why it's not extracting the free bag from the container. So the Board of Inquiry have seen no evidence to suggest that the packing of the reserve pilot chute contributed in any way to the malfunction. The board believes that the restriction or distortion of the reserve pilot chute may have occurred in 2 ways. 1, the pilot chute spring may have launched unevenly and in doing so become caught in the bridle or some other part of the pilot chute's own structure. So as it's gone, instead of springing off, it's kind of gone out sideways and deformed itself somehow. The other one, number 2, the pilot chute may have failed to launch and clear the burble immediately, and while still in the turbulence of the burble, tumbled and became entangled in the bridle. How many of you fly camera? And fly camera wings? Quite a lot of you. Have any of you been kind of lazy with throwing the pilot chute before, and it's come back and sat on your shoulder? I've had this happen numerous times. I'm just going to do this up a bit. Oh, of course I've got a microphone there. Better leave that open. So yeah, if you leave these out, you've got a massive burble behind you. And if you get kind of lazy with the pilot chute, just throw it to the side and then leave these out. I've had it, oh, nothing's happening. And I look over my shoulder and the pilot chute sat here and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm flying wings, aren't I? Bring these in, do that. And I've reduced the burble. I've allowed air to go over my shoulder and then it goes. And I've had it numerous times. And I did think years ago, after this happening, right, 1, I need to start throwing the pilot chute properly and making sure these are in. As soon as I throw it, so from waving off This comes in so that both these wings are now collapsed. Throw the pilot chute hard out and then arch through like this, watching the horizon. Then you feel yourself get pulled upright. So that's controlling the burble, because there's a massive burble behind you and things get caught. And I used to think, what if that happened on a reserve? The pilot chute spring goes off and then sits back on. Well, I figured, well, if I did that, I'd have to do that, get back over and get the air, and hopefully it would go. That's what appears to have happened, okay? Now, have a look at this. This is the secret life of pilot chutes, because they do have a secret life. Right, so this is a guy, they're test jumping some equipment. See that? So that's not flying with wings. For those of you category system instructors, guys jumping with ripcord, you probably see this kind of often. It's just a pilot chute hesitation. You see it a lot. It's nothing abnormal. It's been going on a long time. But if I zoom along here, look at this. Do you think it's impossible for this spring to get all wrapped up in the bridle line before it goes when it's thrashing around on your back like that in a burble? It's highly possible. Unlikely, but possible. See that? Okay, moving on. Recommendations. The board reiterated the recommendations made in the interim report, so a report that comes out before they do the main Board of Inquiry report, that is, issued on the 22nd of September 21. Skydivers should be reminded of their pull priorities and of carrying out their drills, the reserve drills, as high as possible. If skydivers are using camera suits or jackets, they should do what they can to reduce the effects of burble when deploying their main or reserve parachutes. So SDC got together, made a couple of amendments to the ops manual. Camera suit or jacket wings, this is in section 6 on equipment, before using camera suits, the skydiver must have received an appropriate briefing on the associated risks and demonstrated their emergency procedures whilst wearing a camera suit or jacket wings, and these should be recorded in their logbook. Ideally, do this in a suspended harness with the wing on and get them practicing what I was just demonstrating to you, to the point where it becomes muscle memory. How many people do this? If you've got someone who wants to jump camera wings, do you take them aside and obviously you tell them about the effects of burble, you know, if you get the pilot chute caught in the wing, things you can do, all that sort of stuff. But we need to be going further. We need to actually, ideally in a suspended harness, go through physically the malfunctions drills. The other change that had to happen, really, was the minimum canopy opening heights for main parachutes. Now, this was a bit of a grey area because some PTOs were insistent on that, you know, you need to be under canopy at those heights. They're deployment heights. So your canopy is fully deployed at, well, as a C license jumper at 2,500 feet. As a tandem, it would be 5,000 feet. Others were taking it as, well, no, that's when you need to start your deployment. So I want to see you throwing that pilot chute by that height. Okay, so this needed clearing up. 3 things that are used, this comes from the RAF when they were training pilots. 3 things that are utterly useless to a pilot: runway behind you, altitude above you, and fuel on the ground. One of those is relevant to us, altitude above you. All right, so the more height we have, the more options we have of dealing with things. What changed regarding the minimum opening height was this bottom bit under the star and highlighted. The height at which the parachute is to be fully inflated and be in a condition to be controlled by the user. Any questions on this first case study? No worries. Moving on. Case study 2. This was a camera flyer for a tandem skydive. C license, 1,470 jumps. So he had a C license. He hadn't applied for his D license. He just never got round to it. Approximate exit altitude, 14,700 feet. Estimated tandem deployment height was 5,000 feet. Initiated deployment of his main canopy, approximately 4,200 feet. He had some height to play with. Left-hand brake fired during the deployment, resulting in the canopy spinning anti-clockwise into line twists and then locked into a spiral dive to the right. The deceased holds on to the risers, attempting to kick out of the twist for 11 seconds. So think how long 11 seconds is. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, whilst you're spinning nose down to the ground. The twists get worse coming down the risers. At first they stay in the lines, and as it gets worse they creep down the risers. That's quite significant for in a moment. Both hands leave the risers for 17 seconds, during which time it's presumed the deceased was attempting to cut away. Hands then reappear back to the risers for another 4 seconds. The deceased lets go of the risers again, and shortly after, the reserve pilot chute can be seen fully inflated. However, the main canopy does not deploy. Was not cut away, sorry. From the reserve pilot chute being activated, approximately 11 seconds pass before impacting on the roof of a warehouse building. For reasons unknown, the reserve pilot chute fails to extract the free bag before impact. This was the picture on opening. You see the tandem above? So he's given it that 1,000 feet separation. He's deploying his main canopy. Look at these risers. One is still stowed. The other one, as you can see, has fired. I'm going to point something out for you, because I was speaking to Pete Sizer, the chair of riggers, and he said regarding risers, you could do the old riser test, because we were figuring out why did it fire. Was it a packing thing? It didn't appear to be. Was it the risers? And he said, well, you could do the old riser test when you do. I said, what's the old riser test? And he got some risers, and he was like, well, it's really simple. It just simulates a snappier opening. That's it. If these stay in, then it's probably going to stay in up there. You're less likely to have one fire under canopy in a hard opening situation. Well, that's pretty simple. Anyone can do that. And numerous risers I've picked up since, and I've done that, and these go firing off. And it's like, okay, I urge you with your equipment and your friends' equipment, from now on, every now and again, just do that. And take it to a rigger if they come loose, and just have them just a few stitches in there, tighten this up, or a bit of maintenance work done on it, and you're much less likely to have a chance of a break fire on opening. All right, and likewise with the keepers behind for the excess. Get things stowed away nice and neat. Right, this is the canopy as it starts to dive and it starts spinning. And as you can see where the line twists are, they're in the lines. Things are starting to progressively get worse. As you can see, they're out the lines, they're creeping down the risers, getting worse. About 1,000 feet, he's activated his reserve. For whatever reason, he didn't cut away, and we'll get into that in a moment as possible reasons for that. There's the reserve pilot chute. Nothing's happening. So why could he not cut away? Well, the risers he did have on the equipment, which was borrowed equipment, by the way, and it was a canopy that he wasn't used to. He'd done a couple of jumps on it, but it was more high performance than he was used to. He didn't have hard housings in the, sorry, the original ones did, but they were too long. He liked shorter risers. So he says, has anyone got any shorter risers I can use? And sure enough, they had, the rigger had a box of stuff, and he pulled out these risers. He goes, well, these are perfectly airworthy, but they're old. But they didn't have these hard channels that you usually get, especially if jumping higher performance kit, like you do with modern risers. They didn't always come with it, but I would suggest if you don't have them, I'd highly recommend that you do. The idea being that you have these hard channels for the cutaway cable to go up, and if you get twists in the risers, they twist up and twist up, it's not pinching on the line. You should still be able to pull it clear of that housing. So, and as you can see, this is zoomed into the actual incident. So there's the cutaway cable, and there's the top of the channel. The whole thing was twisted up. So there is a potential that he was attempting to cut away, but physically could not do it. He was also wearing gloves, thick or thicker winter gloves. Personally, I like to wear that sort of glove all year round. They last longer, and I don't want to chafe my delicate hands. And he also, because it was a cold day, he had those hand warmers, you know, like hikers wear. You shake them up, put them in your gloves. Fantastic. They work really well. However, they can reduce finger dexterity and feeling, especially. So if you're trying to feel for handles and things like that, consider that. It makes a difference. The other thing, the wing jacket that he was wearing, we put on afterwards. This is Kev. And we were like, is it possible? Because bear in mind, the wind's coming from the back because he's on his back spiraling down. Is it possible that as he brought his hand in, that wing backs itself, and that he actually grabbed part of the wing? Because if you notice on those pictures, he doesn't look down. It's almost like the risers are twisted here and his head's pinned up there, so he can't look down anyway. He's doing this by feeling, we presume. And if he grabbed hold of that, he wouldn't really feel that he had wing. It would just feel like he's got his handle. All right, so that is another potential. We also found that the cutaway pad was actually pulled out slightly, but we don't know if that happened with impacting the roof or whether it happened when the emergency services got to him, moved him around and were attempting to save his life. So why didn't the reserve come out the free bag? Well, we've got some overlay statistic bits and pieces. We can freeze frame any frame and it tells us some information. This comes from the GoPros, right? They've got accelerometers. They can tell what height you are, GPS height. They can tell all sorts of things. You have 1.3 G, it's telling you what G, but more importantly, it tells you the vertical speed. 43 miles an hour in a hard spiral on a 130 square foot canopy, which was elliptical. He was only doing 43 miles an hour. So if you're on your back and you've got the bridle trying to pull around a rig, that could actually be pretty difficult. It's not difficult, it would take more force to extract it. Whereas if it's coming straight from the top, it actually takes very little force. And that was demonstrated when we inspected the equipment. That's actually myself. I was with Jeff Montgomery and the police. We were examining the equipment afterwards, and that's me extracting from all the lines, the free bag, making sure that everything could come out easy. And there was hardly any pressure at all. So this is what we presume has happened. It didn't extract because it's coming around the side. Recommendations: don't delay cutaway. That's something someone from the USPA wrote an article on a little while ago. And it was with regards to exactly that, line twist, people spending too long kicking out line twists, leaving it to the last moment, and then having further problems. Practice emergency procedures and practice what can go wrong. A friend of mine was a scuba diver. I trained him AFF years ago. And after the ground school, he said, your sport's a bit like mine, really. He was like, if we've got an emergency, if there's a problem, it's no worries. We've always got a plan B. There's always an emergency procedure to follow, and that's good. But if something goes wrong with that, it's usually fatal. And I was like, yeah, I suppose he's right. It's exactly that. So equipment and packing, keeping on top of equipment maintenance, like I showed you, that riser check, and making sure things are stowed properly and things are tight. Anticipate these things can happen and cut them off before they do. Right, jumpers may wish to consider installing hard housings within the cutaway cable channels of their risers, should they not already have these fitted. So I urge you, if you don't have them, get them fitted. Right, links between both these cases. Both cases were filming tandems. They were experienced and they were current. They both had done, I believe it was, within the last 90 days, they'd done about 90 odd jumps. All right, so they were pretty current. Both cases were wearing camera wing jackets that may have contributed to these further issues. Both cases started their emergency procedures at a lower altitude. For whatever reason, it was at a lower altitude. They could have been started earlier. Both cases activated their reserve, but their free bag stayed within the container. Both cases had a plan B, but not a plan C. What would a plan C look like? Anyone? Try to pull the reserve bridle. So in free fall, yeah, exactly.
A few years ago, where someone literally flew out his reserve like this in a
That's fantastic.
That's the same in both of these cases.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. John?
It's great you're going to pull something.
Sorry, I should have been handing that
It's
round.
great you're going to try and pull something extra like the reserve bridle, but to have time to do that, you need to start everything so much higher. And these guys really didn't, certainly the first one, didn't really have time to do that. And even the second one, 11 seconds from the reserve pilot chute appearing, it still isn't an awful lot of time for someone to process something in a high-stress situation. You need time, and that means you need height. So you have to start things a lot sooner. And particularly with diving, spinning twists, you eat up the altitude so fast.
Absolutely.
You don't have time to try and kick it out. If it's diving and spinning, that's a cutaway situation. It's not like hanging under a docile large canopy where you can just kick them out.
Could you give that to Josh, please? Thank you.
I believe one of the recommendations that came out of both of these was the use of audibles when using cameras.
Yeah,
I'm curious whether in these cases did they have audibles, and if so, what heights were they set
Yes,
to?
they did.
And what heights were they set to?
That's a very good question.
That seems the important, like we're saying people should have audibles now, but having one for pull height is not really going to prevent these. We need a decision height.
There were some issues regarding the audible in the first one where someone took the audible and because it had turned off. It was checked sometime after, so they went to turn it on, but they weren't familiar with the kit, and there's a very good chance that they hit reset, because the audible settings were what you get from the manufacturer. They didn't. You look at it and you go, well, I wouldn't use that if I was filming a tandem or doing a FS jump or whatever. So that's a very good point. Plan C. So yeah, reaching back, grabbing bridles, things like that. That is something that is a very good chance that we can practice. Sorry, you'd have to put that on now. So instructors, what can we do? Well, for starters, we can enhance the safety culture that already exists. So we already know what we need to do, but it's actually doing it every time consistently, holding ourselves to a higher standard. Holding ourselves accountable for things. If I see someone moving to the door and a pilot chute's slightly hanging out, do you go, oh, I'll tell him about that when he gets back down? Or you go, whoa, hang on a second, let's just get this squared away. Right, off you go. All right, little things like that. And you've all seen it, and I bet numerous times you've gone, I'll tell him about that when he lands. And you're kind of wincing as people are moving to the door. All right, we've got to up the standard. I know it's going to be a pain in the ass for the pilot to go round again if we need to start messing with the kit, but we've got to do this. Sweat the small stuff. That's what I'm pointing out. Actively encourage learning, training, and retraining or reinforcing. Promote a new culture of Plan B thinking for experienced skydivers. That's something we're not potentially, it looks like we are going to be doing it. So you know the requirements to become a B licensed skydiver. You've got all your JM briefs and all that sort of business. When people get the C license and D license, we're looking at putting them in a suspended harness and running through emergency procedures. And also running through what happens if you're reserved, you've pulled that handle and nothing's happening. What are you going to do? Because with a bit of prior warning, like you may be able to get on that a lot earlier than being startled and surprised as to what's going on and then trying to work it out. All right, you've already practiced this, you can anticipate it. Maybe it's roll onto your side of your back and just try and pull stuff or do whatever you can. But this is stuff we don't really want lower experienced people doing this, because it's just going to be overwhelming for them. It really is. You can't train students this stuff, and B license either, really. But once people get the C license, they've got a couple of hundred jumps experience, and now they're starting to do different things. The kit's different. All right, they're jumping smaller, faster kit. They might get line twists, and now that's a bother, whereas before it really wasn't. And, you know, jumping with camera wings, that sort of thing. So there's a very good chance that these will be requirements for attaining C licenses and D licenses. And we'll let you know soon. Any questions?
Just a matter of fact, what containers were they? What containers were they using? And if you don't want to tell me, I understand why.
You can take that if you like, Kev, actually.
Rachel's container was a Javelin, and Sam's was an SWS. Sam's was an SWS Fire.
Ukrainian rig. Yeah. I honestly believe that these likely would have happened with any container, except for a racer, of course. But
I wasn't doing it for that.
yeah,
So right, can you, clearly you mentioned the hard housings on the horizon.
Yep.
Couldn't you just mandate some of these engineering solutions? So I mean, he couldn't cut away, right? It's plausible that he couldn't cut away. Well, if he had hard housings in his risers, it could have saved his life.
Well, the truth is, we don't know if it was that, but it's a highly likely contributor. The other one is the wing covering his handle. And he couldn't look at it. But that's another potential.
Plausible the equipment was poor, right? And you probably see that quite a lot.
I personally had one years ago where I couldn't cut away. I had a similar thing, but rotating canopy. I went from a cutaway and I couldn't pull it. I put two hands on it and then got off of it and then pulled my reserve. And I was like, why did that happen? And up until very recently, I figured, because I had a wrist injury at the time, and I just thought I didn't have the strength in it, and I wasn't peeling the Velcro. But when I think back at it, because I was jumping camera wings, was it I had hold the wing? It's a potential. And then when I let go and grabbed it with both hands, I could pull it pretty easily. It wasn't a hard cutaway. So, yeah. One last thought for you. This was the image, the second case study we looked at, just before that individual climbed out. This is the people going out the door just before him. Can anyone see something wrong there? You see his weight belt? What's with all the excess flapping around next to his hacky? So if that, during free fall, again, it's unlikely, but it's entirely possible, got around the hacky sack, and he wouldn't have known it, and it wave off and pull. Now we've got a horseshoe malfunction going on. That could have been another fatal accident. Right? What would you do if you saw someone climbing into the door and they had that? And this is my point. This is where we need to raise our standards. You see it going on. Stop. Come back in. Let's, I don't know, turn that around or put a rubber band on it or something. But stop letting things go out the door. We have so many close calls in the UK. Fortunately, very few fatalities of recent years. We tend to get one now, roughly every 3 years, whereas previously it was multiple every year. Okay, so we are doing this good, but we need to improve it. Thank you for taking part. I know I'm aware that time's getting on, so thank you very much. Hope you learned something from that.